Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anindita. I have completed my master's in linguistics from the University of Calcutta, and today I'm about to present my paper on translation and its effects on humor, a case study on selected stories from Feluda Shomukro. To begin with, this paper deals with the concepts of translation and humor and how humor is affected in the process of translation. In this paper, I will discuss both the concepts of translation and humor, and then I'll try to analyze the extracts that I've taken from the short stories from Feluda Sharma group to support my hypothesis. To begin with translation, translation can be defined as the replacement of textual material in one language, which is the source language, by an equivalent textual material in another language, which is referred to as the target language. Translation is simply the process of transferring a source language information into an equivalent text in the target language, which is the translated text. The text usually adopts the source language's culture, grammar, social conventions, traditions, geographic and historic details as well. Translators have had a very rich history, and right from ancient times they have been given a very respectable position in society. Their profession has been considered very high, and they have been given privileges which were often denied to the regular citizens of a state or a country. For instance, China has its most active and well-known set of interpreters, and they were mainly Buddhist monks. In Turkey also, translators were known as dragomans, and in Istanbul, the translators and interpreters were exempted on taxes that were generally levied on the non-Muslim citizens of the Islamic State, and they were also allowed other privileges like riding a horse or growing a beard. Now, these privileges were typically meant for the Muslim citizens of the Islamic State, but owing to the profession, the translators were also given this kind of privileges. So from here itself you can understand their standing in the society back then. So translation can be categorized on the basis of extent, level and rank, and then these three categories can be further subdivided. We'll look into that in the further slides. On the basis of extent, this categorization mainly depends on the extent of the source language text that is allowed to go through the translation process. So in this categorization, a text can be submitted, like an entire text can be submitted in the translation process. So that text could be a piece of writing, a whole book, and only an extract or a sentence or even just a clause. So there are two types of translation which can be further divided on the basis of extent, which is full and partial translations. In full translation, the entire text undergoes translation. Every part of the source language text is replaced by the target language equivalent. Whereas, quite contrary to this concept, in partial translation, some portions only of the source language text may not undergo any kind of translation. Now, this happens when the translator cannot find a suitable equivalent. Now, that may happen because of culture differences, because of different vocabulary, different grammar, and usually under such circumstances, the portions are left untranslated. So that is usually an instance of non-equivalence, and we'll look into this concept further in the presentation. Next is on the basis of level. So this class of translation talks about the level of language which is involved in a translation process. According to this category again, translation can be further divided into total translation and restricted translation. So total translation is defined as the replacement of the source language grammar and lexis by equivalent target language grammar and lexis, with consequential replacement of source language phonology and graphology by the target language phonology and graphology. So from this we can understand that the text undergoes complete replacement. It is not replaced in portions or only a certain section of the text undergoes translation. It is not so. And again, quite contrastive to this particular concept is the restricted translation, where the source language is replaced by the target language equivalence only at one particular level. That could be at the phonological or the graphological level or the grammatical or the lexical level, not the entire construction or the set of extract. Next is on the basis of rank. So translation on the basis of rank refers to the rank or the grammatical hierarchy at which translation equivalence is established. So the equivalence can take place at any rank, be it the sentence to sentence rank or word to word or morpheme to morpheme. It can be any rank. And again, on this category, translation can be further divided into two types, which is rank-bound translation and again unbounded translation. Rank-bound translation is where the target language equivalents are confined to one particular rank in a grammatical hierarchy. It usually operates at the word level or the morpheme level, and it will set up a word-to-word equivalence or a morpheme-to-morpheme equivalence, and not in all the hierarchies that are present in the next rank. Again, very opposite to this particular idea is the concept of unbounded translation. It is the case of regular translation where equivalences are not always confined to one rank, which is why it is termed as unbounded translation. Next is the concept of translation equivalence. It is simply a term that describes the target language text that replaces the source language text in the process of translation. So there are two types of equivalences that we generally come across. One is the textual equivalence and the other is the formal equivalence. Textual equivalence is the target language equivalence of a given source language text. It is considered nearly accurate to the source language, which is to say it will be the majority portion of the translation will be accurate. The source language and the target language, most proportions of it would be accurate, whereas in formal equivalence, the target language category, which is said to occupy as nearly possible a place in the economy of the target language as given in the source language. This is to say that the target language and the source language replacement won't be exactly similar to each other, but they would occupy nearly an accurate position as nearly as possible. So this is the difference between the two. Next is the concept of non-equivalence. So non-equivalence is when the source language text cannot be translated to the target language. This kind of problem arises when there is a culture difference in both the languages, when there are differences in grammar, differences in vocabulary. So there are a lot of factors. We will come into that in the later portions. So the first factor that contributes to non-equivalence is the concept of semantic field and lexical set, and the other factor is non-equivalence at word level. Semantic fields and lexical sets. So we know different languages have different vocabulary and they are represented in a series of conceptual fields. These fields generally represent linguistic divisions and subdivisions, and these divisions are referred to as semantic fields and the subdivisions are referred to as lexical sets. For example, if we consider trees would be semantic fields and a banyan tree would be the lexical set. So the idea of semantic field works well enough for words and experiences which have fairly well-defined proportional meanings, but not in every circumstances. Non-equivalence at the word level is the other factor which leads to non-equivalences, and mainly they are stimulated by factors like culture-specific problems, the source language text not the text, words or vocabulary not being lexicalized in the target language, when the target language lacks hyponyms, usage of loan words in the source language, lack of superordinate terms, and also mainly when there is a difference in meaning in the source language and the target language. Next is the concept of humor. Humor is a very abstract concept and it's really very difficult to explain humor, but even then there are certain theories that have been developed by eminent personalities all throughout these ages. So I try to explain humor based on the theories that I've collected. So there are three kinds of theories: superiority theory, relief theory, and incongruity theory. The first theory, superiority theory. According to this theory, we laugh from feelings of superiority over other people. When we feel superior to others and we laugh, so that is the instance of superiority theory, and the feeling of superiority is producing laughter. Relief theory, this is more psychological in nature and it basically refers to that energy which is stored up in our body due to humor and it needs to be released, and this entire action is visible in the form of laughter. And incongruity theory, humor is produced when there is an incongruity between the expected and the final result of a joke. So the cause of laughter would simply be the sudden perception of the incongruity between a concept and the real objects, which have been thought through in some relation. It basically talks about the incongruity between a natural occurrence and an unnatural occurrence, or the incongruity between what we expect and the sudden unexpectedness of the result that the joke or the humor is producing. Also, there are certain linguistic theories which support humor. To talk about those, we need to understand humor and syntax, humor and pragmatics, semantic script theory of humor, the 5-level model of joke representation, and the general theory of verbal humor. So the first point is humor and syntax. So humor and syntax come together where we understand the ambiguity in jokes. In every humorous instance, we don't often get to hear or understand things right at the first instance. I mean, there is an ambiguity between what the meaning is, what meaning the reader or the audience is deriving, and what meaning the author or the writer is trying to convey. So that ambiguity is producing humor. Humor and pragmatics, we all understand the power of unspoken words in humor. Often words that we don't speak produce more of humor than the words that's spoken. So that is humor and pragmatics. Semantic script theory of humor. So humor has two different scripts involved. When I spoke about humor as being the juxtaposition of a natural and an unnatural occurrence, here the natural and the unnatural occurrences, both of these are basically two different scripts. Two scripts with two contrasting ideas. When these two contrasting ideas come together, it is that point of juxtaposition where two unnatural occurrences are being brought together. It's that particular point where humor is being produced. So that is the semantic script theory of humor. Script is defined as the set of information about the lexemes or the part of the world. The scripts have to be opposed to each other to produce humor, otherwise the humor won't be produced. The last point would be the 5-level model of joke representation, and the 5 levels are surface, language, target plus situation, template, and basic, which is the verbal script theory of humor. Next is the general theory of verbal humor. This general theory of verbal humor has been derived from the semantic script theory which we discussed earlier, and it has been introduced by Victor Ruskin. The 6 knowledge resources are as follows: language, narrative strategy, target, situation, logical mechanism, and script opposition. Language is a very important linguistic component. It is the role of the language that plays a very important role in the production of humor. Narrative strategy is yet another important factor, because the language or the setting of the story or the construction of the construction's narration basically has to be in a certain way which will produce humor. It won't be like our regular conversation, it has to be different. So that particular narrative strategy is being referred to here. Target, the joke is always targeted to someone or targeted at someone, so that is the target we're talking about. Situation is the circumstances or the situation where the joke has been set upon. The participants are used, the objects are used, and all of this all together actually contribute to the setting of the joke or the humor. Logical mechanism, this is the mechanism that incorporates both the scripts and a joke. The scripts that are involved, the opposing ideas that are involved in the production of a humor. Logical mechanism is the concept that binds both of this together. And script opposition, this is the most abstract mechanism, and it deals with the script opposition concept, and it has been discussed in the semantic script theory of humor. The contrasting ideas is the script opposition. I move on to my data analysis that I have collected from short stories from Feluda Somogro. My first data is Akash Theke Laltal Ube Jawa. This is the source language, and the targeted language text is the target language text is, the last traces of red had disappeared from the sky. Akash theke lal tal ube jawa is basically an expression that refers to the sky clearing of the last traces of red and orange colors of the dusk before the dark night sets in. Here humor lies in the words lal tal. These are echo words. Usage of echo words are very common in Bengali, but it is not a very common practice in English. Also, if we go by the literal translation process, it disrupts semantics of the construction, because we will get a meaning for lal, but we cannot derive a separate meaning for tal. So there in itself, it's an instance of non-equivalence as well. And since humor lies in these words and the translation process fails to derive words for both the words or derive a proper equivalent in the target language, humor is diminished. Next is 391 and the target language is Shut the Door or Big Fat Hen. 390 is a code, it's a number code that unfolds into a password of a chest in the story. And Shut the Door, oh Big Fat Hen is also a password that is used in the English translation. Now, the humor is set in the code. The first instance that produces humor in the code is where a pet parrot is uttering the words. It refers back to the situation of the knowledge resources where I talked about situation of the joke. A parrot speaking out a word in the story produces humor, firstly. Second, 390 is a number code. At the same time, Shut the Door, oh Big Fat Hen is also a number code. But what we see is 390 could not be translated into English. A completely different set of code had to be developed, semantically different set of code had to be developed. So this again is an instance of non-equivalence, and the source language code could not be exported to the target language. Next is Aribbas ki kore bujhli, and in the target language it's that's terrific. Now Aribbas ki kore bujhli, like we all know, the natives we all know, it's an expression of excitement and awe. It is usually used to denote a surprised speaker or character. It is important to note that the word Aribbas lacks a hyponym that could convey the humor in the target language. The humor, the excitement, the playfulness of the term. Also, this word is very culture specific, and it has references that only a native Bengali would understand. This refers to the tone of the word that has been used, and also since we do not get a literal translation of the word Aribbas in the target language, hence once again humor is diminished in this process. Next is Mathar Ghilu Edik Odik Hoye Jawa, and the translated text is May Damage My Brain. Mathar Ghilu Edik Odik Hoye Jawa, this term usually refers to a very confused state of mind of an individual. Now, there is a stark difference between the expected and the final outcome. Like we spoke in the semantic script theory of humor, two different scripts are involved. So, Mathar Ghilu Edik Odik Hoye Jawa, Mathar Ghilu refers to our brain cells. We know our brain cells do not move, but this particular expression talks about our brain cells moving and creating some kind of disruption. So this idea is very unnatural, and that exactly produces humor, and this is the concept of semantic script theory of humor. But at the same time, if we see in the target language, may damage the brain, this is something very common and natural, and we do not have two different scripts opposing to each other that is producing any kind of humor or an unnatural occurrence or an unnatural setting that the human brain is not able to relate to. Hence, there is nothing to produce humor in this instance. As a result of which, once again, humor is lost in the process of translation. Next is Maje Maje Foron Dile Apotti Nei, and there is no translated text that has been, this line is completely missing from the translated text. The source language refers to a witty humor which is often used as a sarcastic comment, and though in the text it refers to help from time to time. This is how it has been used in the text. Now once again, foron means spices in Bengali, and it is typically used for cooking. But here we see phoron has not been used in the context of cooking. It has been used in a completely different setting. This is the concept of collocation, where phoron is not used in its natural setting, that is not used with cooking. Here again, collocation, like I said, it defies the concept of collocation. Again, the semantic script theory of humor comes into view, where two different contrasting ideas are being juxtaposed, and once again the audience sorry, the audience is experiencing a humorous incident. So here humor is produced, and at the same time, when this line is missing from the target language, humor is missing again, because the translator is trying to substitute this entire incident with something that is more familiar to the non-native readers, but only a native reader knows the connotation of the word phoron that has been used here, and the non-native readers would never understand that, as a result of which this line is missing, and once again humor is lost in the process. Next example is Mrito dekhle to tar poa baro, and again translation is not available in the target language. This again is an instance of non-equivalence, and this term poa baro, it is a Bengali idiom that has been used. This is the humor element. It means, or it rather refers to someone who is benefiting from someone else's death. Now this phrase, which is an idiom, has not been translated into English, and this is because we usually see it is very difficult to translate the literary devices that are very commonly used in text to induce humor. So this is very much an instance of non-equivalence, and again humor is lost since the humor element in itself could not be translated by the translator. So from all these data that I've collected, the observations that I've drawn are as follows. So there are certain problems that persist, and they are one of the most common problems, which are the syntactic problems, the semantic problems, the phonological problems, and usage problems. Let's focus on the syntactic problems first. To begin with, the do verb. This verb acts both as the main and the auxiliary verb in English, whereas in Bangla it is used just as the main verb. The have verb shows ownership and is the main verb in Bangla, whereas it's both the auxiliary and main verb in English. The word orders, it's different in both the languages. For Bangla, it's the SOV pattern, while in English, it's the SVO pattern. Numbers and genders. Bangla and English have numbers, that is, they have both singular and plural numbers, but the gender system is different in both the languages. Bangla has grammatical genders, whereas English does not have any grammatical gender for any word. Personal pronoun, Bangla does not differentiate between male and female pronouns, whereas English has two different pronouns to identify both the genders. Next is the semantic problems. There are three factors: idioms, collocation, and connotation. Idioms, like I said in one of my data, that it's very difficult to translate the literary devices because we often do not we do not derive any individual meaning from the words, as a result of which it is very difficult to derive a particular meaning from the literary devices. So usually these literary devices are used to induce humor, and when we cannot translate them, there itself humor is lost. Collocation, I explained collocation as well. Collocation is the natural setting or the natural environment of a particular word, the natural environment where a particular word is being used. The moment we try to draw the word out of its natural environment, it either produces humor or it may form a very faulty construction, something that we cannot use in our writings. So there also, while translating collocation, that becomes different because we have different sets of vocabulary in both the languages, and obviously translators find it very difficult to translate collocations as well. Connotation. Now connotation refers to cultural references, political references, historic, geographical references. These cannot be transported or exported to the target language text, because we cannot translate cultural connotations or social conventions. So there again humor is lost. Phonological problems, tone and rhythm. I also talked about tone in one of my examples. To be particular, in Arib Bas, we easily identify the humor in Oedipus because we as natives understand the tone of the word, but a non-native speaker would never identify the humor in the word because the person is not aware of the tone of the word. So the tone is basically the author's attitude that is generally expressed through the characters and the dialogues of a text. So the tone is very important to identify the setting of the humor, to understand the setting of the story, the character's personality, and if we do not understand the tone, humor is once again lost. And rhythm is a phonological feature of a language that generally determines the stress and the unstressed pattern, and this rhythmic pattern is different in Bangla and in English. Usage problems refer to several non-linguistic factors like cultural, political, social, religious, etc., and also kinship terms, and they are usually specific to the source language. While translating them, a translator usually cannot translate these non-linguistic factors, as a result of which once again humor is lost. Also, there are three set of challenges that I think are very important and usually is a hindrance while translating humor. First is humor comprehension and humor production. These two are very completely different set of skills, and one might have humor comprehension skill or humor production skill and may not have both. So as a result of this, maybe the translator have humor comprehension skills, but he does not have the humor production skill and he is not able to produce humor while writing. Or maybe he is comprehending humor from the source language text where he is not supposed to comprehend humor. He is translating them wrong in that case. So there's a disparity, basically this becomes a problem. Secondly, humor and its appreciation vary greatly from one individual to another. Two individuals would never perceive humor the same way. There always will be differences. Thirdly, use of rhetorics like the literary devices like our idioms make it very difficult to translate humor. The source language may use several puns and metaphors through dialogues of characters like we see in our Lal Mohan Ganguly's character, but they basically add up to the personality, the fun and the characterization of the characters, but that since those cannot be translated in the target language, there again humor is lost, and this makes it also the translators find it difficult to find replacement or the proper target language equivalence for literary devices, which is why they cannot translate humor. Thank you. That's all about the paper.